Members will take their seats. Visitors will retire from the chamber. The Sergeant-at-Arms will close the doors. Members and visitors are asked to please silence all electronic devices. This evening's prayer will be offered by Representative Winslow. We'd ask our members as well as our guests in the gallery to please stand for the prayer and to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance thereafter. Representative Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, Lord. We love you and thank you. Thank you for the blessings you've given us, and thank you for the challenges that help us grow closer to you. Thank you for the honor and the blessings to serve our great state of North Carolina. Help us not to forget that you made us few out of many to do your will. Lord, I pray for those that do not know Christ. Send us out each day to do your will so that others will know your word and his salvation. Please watch over us, guide us, and lead us. We love you and thank you. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The gentleman from Caldwell, Representative Hall, is recognized for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, the journal for December 9th has been examined and found to be correct. I move that it be approved as written.
Representative Hall moves the journal for December 9th be approved as written. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the journal is approved as written. Representative Hall is recognized to send forth committee report. Clerk will read.
Representative Dustin Hall, Rules, Calendar, and Operations of the House Committee Report. Senate Bill 921, Constitutional Amendment, require photo ID for all voters. Favorable.
Calendar, without objection, today's calendar, so ordered. Members, Representative Drakeford submitted a resolution memorializing the life of former member Kelly Alexander. The resolution contained the full Mecklenburg delegation as primary sponsors, exceeding the maximum number permitted under our rules. However, the chair would ask without objection that the clerk be ordered to, number one, file the resolution notwithstanding the sponsorship rule to allow that, and second, that the resolution receive its first reading today and be added to today's calendar. Is there any objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. So let's go ahead and resolve at least the following introduction of the bills and resolutions. The clerk will read.
Representatives Drakeford, Carney, Cunningham, Majid, Cotham, Autry, Belk, Bradford, Harris, Lofton, Logan, Terry Brown, and Budd. House Joint Resolution 1082, a joint resolution honoring Kelly Alexander, former member.
Calendar. Senate Bill 921, the clerk will read.
Senators Hayes, Daniel P. Newton. Senate Bill 921, a bill to be entitled Constitutional Amendment, require photo ID for all voters. The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
The gentleman from Iredell, Representative Mills, is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, members. Senate Bill 921 is very straightforward. The bill would submit to the voters the question of whether to amend the North Carolina Constitution to require photo identification for all voters. That's in person and absentee. I ask for your support.
For what purpose does the lady from Guilford, Representative Harrison, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll keep this brief, and I appreciate Representative Mills' remarks, but I just want to point out that this bill is not necessary. We don't need a constitutional amendment. We already have a statute that covers this issue. It should be noted that our absentee ballot requirements now are the strictest in the nation. I also want to know why we would put into a constitution an amendment that we know what establishes a flawed process. The Rules Committee heard testimony from an individual who had worked the voter protection, the nonpartisan voter protection hotline. there were a number of, and I saw this myself when I was working the polls, there was an enormous amount of confusion amongst both the voters and the poll workers in terms of what was an acceptable form of voter ID. And this has more than almost 500 voters who are disenfranchised because they didn't meet the voter ID requirement as interpreted by the local poll workers. And this is the in-person voter ID. I will add that there's some speculation that this constitutional amendment is actually meant to get into the way of some litigation related to the usurper doctrine. The case is NAACP v. Moore, which is in the middle of a discovery process. So for these reasons, I would encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House, passage of Senate Bill 921 on second reading. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Clerk will open the vote. Representative John available. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 73 having voted in the affirmative, 45 in the negative. Senate Bill 921 passes second reading without objection. Be read a third time.
The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Question before the House, passage of Senate Bill 921 on third reading. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Clerk will open the vote. Yes, we'll excuse the absence to Representative John. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 73 having voted in the affirmative, 45 in the negative. Senate Bill 921 passes its third reading. That bill, Mr. Clerk, is ordered enrolled. Representative Reeves, would the gentleman approach the dais, please? As well as the Rules Chairman and the Majority Leader. Chair is about, well, first of all, we will go call up Senate Bill 382. The clerk will read.
Senators Perry, Corbin, and Johnson, Senate Bill 382, a bill to be entitled Disaster Relief 3, Budget, Various Law Changes. The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Members, in terms of debate on this bill, the chair just conferred with the Democratic leader, the Republican leader, and the Rules Chair, and has an agreement among the parties on this one. The debate will be limited to two individuals. On the Democratic side, it will be Representative Reeves for a period of up to 7 minutes. Representative Ager will have a period of up to 5 minutes to speak to the bill. The same will be extended to the majority side, so there will be equal time. I'll let the Majority Leader or the Rules Chair advise which other member other than the Rules Chair would like to carry to speak to the override, and I'll do that. But we're going to apply that rule, and we did have significant debate on this bill. As remember, it went for several hours, but we know the chair is aware of several folks who have some issues this afternoon, health-wise and whatnot. So trying to be mindful of that, as well as we have some family members for the resolution that will be following that. So that will be the order of business in terms of this. So if any other members seek the floor, the rules shall be recognized for the motion for previous question, but the chair would simply ask, based on this agreement, that members please comply with that on both sides of the aisle. So with that, at this time, for a motion, the gentleman from Caldwell, Representative Hall, is recognized first for a motion, then to debate the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House pass Senate Bill 382, Disaster Relief 3, Budget, Various Law Changes, notwithstanding the objections of the Governor.
The gentleman has moved that the House do override the veto to Senate Bill 382 and has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I won't go long in debating the various merits of the bill because we've already done that as a body when we were here when we passed it the first time. But I will speak to a couple of things that I've heard in the media, some things that I frankly think were framed incorrectly. And the first deals with disaster relief in this bill. Those of you who have been here before this session, have been through hurricane relief before, understand that the way that this body's handled hurricane relief has been similar to the way that it's been handled in the past. We've had many hurricanes in eastern North Carolina, and typically those hurricanes cause such damage to the state that it's not possible for the state alone to meet that burden. And that's why Congress, time after time, in natural disasters across the country, comes in and passes funding to go to those affected states. And that's what I think is going to happen here. I spent all day yesterday in D.C. talking to our federal delegation, including both of our U.S. senators, and we've got every indication that help is on the way, and on the way very soon, probably by Christmas, by the end of this month, and we anticipate getting maybe $25 billion or so. And that's the kind of money that it's going to take to make a material impact on the disaster in western North Carolina. And I've been out there too, been to some of your districts to see the devastation. Some of you all have lived it, as Representative Dudley Green has, who went with me yesterday to D.C. to make our case to our folks in Congress. It's probably a $50 billion problem. Hurricanes generally do cost tens of billions of dollars, and no state, no matter how fiscally well they handle things, can possibly meet that kind of burden. And so what we do as a state is what we've done this time. We come in and we pass a bill to try to meet at least some immediate relief for those folks who are most affected. And this body now has passed roughly $1 billion in funding for storm relief for western North Carolina. After our vote, when we were here a few weeks ago, I found out from central staff that of the money that we've already appropriated for storm relief, maybe somewhere around half, if that, has been spent thus far. Not only just spent, but or even committed this far. And that's because after a storm, as we've dealt with many times before, you can send all the money in the world to it immediately. But you've got to go out and figure out where the need lies. And the damage area is so great that it takes time for folks to figure out where does the money need to go. And again, that's why the billion we've already sent has not been spent. And we're now at least a couple of months out from the hurricane. And so it's nothing unusual the way this body's handled this particular storm relief, which is why it's so disappointing to see the arguments that some have made that this body is not taking care of our folks who have dealt with disaster. Well, let me tell you what I plan to do as we come into the next session. We're going to have to come in and take a look at the way NCORP and other groups deal with hurricane relief. We see now in eastern North Carolina, 8 years later, over 1,000 people are still living in a hotel or otherwise not having their homes rebuilt. We heard testimony a few weeks ago from the director of NCORP that essentially they'd lost hundreds of millions of dollars. They didn't keep track of it. And that's not surprising from a government bureaucrat, but what's infuriating about it is when you're dealing with folks whose their sole job is to get people back in their homes. Think about 8 years of being out of your home. Eastern North Carolina is flat, a little bit easier to build there than it is in western North Carolina. The topography is more difficult. If it took them 8 years in eastern North Carolina and they're not done yet, I don't know that they'll ever be able to get western North Carolina built. So this body's got a duty to come in when we come in January, and we need to look into NCORP, and we're going to do that because it's a disgrace what's happened in the eastern part of this state. And as I've said before, it should be a national scandal. In my opinion, if the governor were a Republican, it would be a national scandal. But politics aside, the reality of it is it's Republicans and Democrats who don't have their houses in eastern North Carolina. It's Republicans and Democrats who lost their houses in western North Carolina. And what we've got to do as a body is come together to make sure that we fix that moving forward. And at the same time, you all know well, this state, right now we've got $5 billion or so in our disaster relief fund. We've appropriated roughly $1 billion of that. And so even if today we passed a bill sending $5 billion in hurricane relief to western North Carolina, the reality is the $1 billion that's already been sent has not even been spent. Again, it takes time to go in and help these folks in the best way. And I'm not at all confident that the current administration can do that. In fact, I know they can't. I'm hopeful the next administration will be able to do that. I've talked to Governor-elect Stein, expressed to him my desire to see a change up in the way those things are done. He's assured me that he'll do that, and I'll take him at his word. This body is entirely committed to helping the folks of this state in storm relief. And so in my opinion, what's happened is a political football has been made out of this bill that's passed towards the end of session. The other thing I'll mention is there's been some comments about balance of powers in the executive branch. And the reality is in this state, the Constitution gives this body the ability to make certain decisions. And the folks elected this body just as they did the governor or Governor-elect Stein coming in. And that's what we've done in this bill. The Board of Elections piece in particular, I'll speak to. You know, in a perfect world, I wish we could have equal numbers of folks from each party on each side of the board, the way the Federal Elections Commission does it, the way many states across our country do that. And we got that passed, and unfortunately, it's tied up in the courts. And so this body decided to go in a different direction. And it did it at the same time that we're seeing local boards of elections across the state approve voters who are obviously not eligible, people who have passed away before Election Day, for example. And that's not in dispute. That's happened, and it's been reported on over and over. And so my only desire, and I know the desire of, frankly, in my opinion, everybody sitting on this floor right now, is that the folks who are eligible to vote be registered and that their vote count. And it needs to be this body making those rules, because that's how our system works. The General Assembly creates the law, the executive goes in and enforces it. And in this bill, part of the executive branch, which is the state auditor, will do that. I simply disagree with the way that the current State Board of Elections has handled things, preventing parties that are maybe on the right from getting on the ballot, while helping parties who are on the right get on the ballot, while making it very difficult for parties on the left to get on the ballot. And they've had to be sued by people like the Green Party to get on the ballot. And so my point is not to get into every potential example of what I see as abuse of the process by the Board of Elections, but my point is to say our desire simply is that the law be enforced as it's written, and no more and no less, and that folks be properly registered and that votes be properly counted. So I hope you'll override this veto. I know that there will be much more to come in storm relief in western North Carolina, and we've got to continue to help those in eastern North Carolina as well. Again, 8 years out, not back into their homes. When we come back in 2025, I expect to be the speaker of this body, and I can tell you that my sole priority from day one is going to be that hurricane relief. We absolutely cannot let happen what's happened in the past. And every member of this body who wants to join me in that effort, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I'm going to work with you, because it's about helping folks get back into their homes. That's not about politics. This bill provides.
The chair would remind the folks in the gallery to please not interrupt the proceedings.
The folks in western and eastern North Carolina need our help. And this bill does more than just money. Hurricane relief is not just about money. I've talked about the money we've already sent and the fact that it's not already been spent, but it also provides things that really matter to folks with regulatory relief for western North Carolina, delaying their payments on licenses and certain other issues that they shouldn't have to deal with while they're out of their homes, dealing with issues like building codes to make sure that people have a warm place to sleep while the state comes in and tries to help them. And if we don't override this veto today, those people will have to wait another at least 40 days to get that relief. And so I bet if you ask those folks who are there on the ground now, does that matter to them? I'll tell you that it does. This bill gives them that relief immediately. I hope you'll join me in voting to override the veto. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from Buncombe, Representative Prather, is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Diamond Brand, Bold Rock, Antique Tobacco Barn, Rough Life Dog Training Services, Smart Shop Self-Storage, Walgreens, Discount Tire, Cheddar's Scratch Kitchen, Hobbytown, Regeneration Station, Great Clips, Riverview Station, and the 60-plus artists that they house. Those are just some of the businesses that have closed so far, either permanently or indefinitely, just in Buncombe County. It is impossible to know how many businesses have actually closed. That's part of the devastation of this all. Some of them might have even thought they could initially survive and then made the decision to permanently close based on the lack of any certainty coming from the legislature. And that's just our businesses. Let's look at some numbers. 103 lives lost. 74,000 homes damaged, and those are only the ones that have been recognized by FEMA so far. 5,000 households remain in transitional sheltering out of the 196,000 households that are eligible for it. 56 direct housing units currently in place. And none of that even touches the renters. Renters don't have access to the individual assistance funding. They would qualify under what's referred to as other needs assistance, of which $191 million has been allocated by FEMA so far. 17 disaster recovery centers still remain open. That number in and of itself shows you how we are still very much in response and recovery. Stacy is a single parent. She drives her son to and from East Asheville every day. Her son has special needs, and his local public school was unable to accommodate him for a full day. He's been thriving at his charter school. She can't make her car payment. She can barely make her rent. She was denied FEMA and is relying on local nonprofits to assist her to make ends meet. She wishes that she lived on a bus line, but she doesn't. She just wants to take her son to school without fear that her car will be repossessed. She needs more help. Zoe is in the service industry. She's worked at the Grove Park Inn for 2 years at the highest end restaurant there. It's been closed since September 27th and will not reopen until December 19th. 5 of her colleagues have already moved away from Western North Carolina because they simply could not afford to wait for help. She misses her coworkers who became like family. For individuals like Zoe, the majority of her annual income is earned from April to December. She's worried she won't be able to pay her bills or pay the rent. She needs more help. Tanya is a lifelong resident of Western North Carolina and lived in her home for 45 years. She lost everything from Hurricane Helene. She was told that she was approved for a FEMA trailer to be placed on her property for temporary housing. However, this was blocked because she's in a floodplain. She also cannot rebuild unless she is 10 feet above the water line. At over 80 years old, her long-term ability to traverse steps required for access would be challenging. She did all the right things. She owned her home, had homeowners insurance, had flood insurance, but they paid a meager amount that won't come close to allowing her to replace her home. She needs more help. Every legislator in this chamber has received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails asking us to sustain this veto. Please, please vote for Western North Carolina.
The gentleman from Buncombe, Representative Ager, is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise again disappointed today. As we all know, Hurricane Helene just hit Western North Carolina. It was the deadliest hurricane that this state has seen since 1857. It's not just another hurricane. This is a different story. This bill just doesn't meet the moment, and it doesn't meet North Carolina's values, and we ought to vote to uphold the governor's veto. Our state's motto is something that I've always tried to live up to. Esse quam videre, to be rather than to seem. And this bill just seems to do something to help. It doesn't actually do it. And that's the real problem. The people of Western North Carolina, as you've heard here and have heard, yesterday and today, people need help. And this bill just doesn't get it to them. I realize we've put some money out there, but it hasn't gotten into the hands of the people that need it because it's not directed that way. It's directed to a lot of other institutions and governments and other things like that. In the mountains, this isn't a political issue. We're all on the same side in the mountains. People are suffering and they need help. In 2018, Hurricane Florence hit Duplin, and we Duplin and Onslow and Pender and Sampson and New Hanover and Brunswick counties. It was devastating, and the North Carolina General Assembly stepped in to help. Within 3 months of that disaster, the General Assembly allocated $1.5 billion for relief. We're now at the 3-month mark for Helene, and we know where we are. That money went to to repair homes. That money went for affordable housing. It was funds for farmers. For Helene, which by all estimates that I've seen is about 3 times the value of Florence. And we've allocated 2/3 as much money at the 3-month mark just to balance the two against each other. I struggle every day and wondering what I'm supposed to tell my friends, my family, my neighbors when I go down to Food Lion to pick up groceries. The only grocery store in my little community. Do I just tell them, what they already suspect? That we're just, too far away from Raleigh for the state to really pay attention? That's what they already think. That's what people in Western North Carolina think. Buncombe County's gone from the lowest unemployment in the state to the highest unemployment in the state in 3 months. And we've got businesses failing. We've got farmers trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with fields that are covered up in silt and soil and sand, and others that are just, bedrock. We had a committee meeting this morning, which is a good first step, but it's been 3 months. We've been down here a couple of times, and we should have done more sooner. We talk about figuring all this out. The people in North Carolina are tired of hearing that help is on the way. It's not coming. And that's the way people feel. So we've just got to do better. We're not here, to talk to each other and slowly drip money out. We know that flexible, quick money is how you get through disasters, and that's what we need to do. So I really would encourage everyone to vote to uphold this veto, and let's really get to work so that we get real money in the hands of real people who need it in Western North Carolina. Thank you.
The gentleman from Chatham, Representative Reeves, is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One, for the folks that are here, I want you to understand a whole lot of us want to talk. We don't have that option. For those that don't follow the House, I think to say it was a negotiation is a little overstating. We get told what we're going to do, and that's kind of what we have to do. So I now have 1 minute and 43 seconds to tell you this simply. I have to push back a little bit at something I heard about making this political. This is called a disaster bill. If you look this up online, it says it's a disaster bill. We had a chance to help all North Carolinians today. We've had that opportunity twice now. We don't even have to come back for session at these times. So if we're coming back in the midst of the worst disaster that we've had in the history of this state, I would have loved for us to use this as an opportunity to put everything about our politics aside and maybe even show the country that the right thing to do is to worry about the people. We may have had other plans until the disaster hit, just like the people in Western North Carolina had other plans before the disaster hit. But when disasters hit, you recognize one thing: all that other stuff doesn't matter anymore. We need to help people get their lives back. That's what we should have been doing today. That's what we should have done a month ago. That's what I wish we would concentrate on. But what I've heard today is a focus on politics, and I am disappointed sorely. So I am sorry to the people of Western North Carolina that we did not take the opportunity that we had today to do the right thing by you, to decide that it's not worth the politics. But I will tell you in these last 10 seconds, there are at least 49 people here who have not forgotten what you're going through. And we're here for you, and we will keep fighting for you. Thank you.
And for the final speaker on this bill, the gentleman from Avery, Representative Green, is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the election provisions in this bill. My colleague has spoken on those eloquently, and I think they're adequately addressed. I want to speak to you a little bit about hurricane relief. September 25th of this year, we had a storm in Avery County. Our bridge, the water had come up to such a point where my family and I decided we needed to cross the creek to keep from being cut off. And fortunately, I have a sister that lives right over there. So we left the home place that both my sister and I had lived in as we were growing up and went over there. Got by fairly unscathed that night, although we recognized when we went back across the bridge to go back over there to the house, the water had already washed the pavement up off the driveway. So, and we were saying to ourselves, but the hurricane hadn't hit yet. It's still coming. So the next night, we'd already planned, we just need to go on over to my sister's house. And along about dark, that's what we did. We spent that night, and it was raining. Wind was blowing like crazy. We spent that night taking turns, getting up, looking to see, and I'm talking about now a creek that is 4 to 6 inches deep, usually, and about maybe 8 feet wide. And we began watching that thing. And we would get up every hour or two and look out. And there's 2 bridges there on that property. And the water gets over the low water bridge fairly regularly, and we always know that's the signal when we really need to pay attention to the high water bridge. And throughout the night, we looked and we said, well, it's not up to the high water bridge yet. So maybe we're going to get by this time. But we went on, and just about everybody in the house got up. my sister, my brother-in-law, my wife and I, my son, my daughter-in-law, actually her sister and their dog. We were all piled up in there in my sister's house. Daylight came and we said, well, maybe we're good. Maybe we're good. This thing's only supposed to last till about 11 or 12 o'clock today. Maybe we're going to get by. As the day went on, we kept saying that. As we watched that 8-foot wide creek get over down below our house, probably 50 feet wide, and rushing water. Somewhere along about 10:30, 10 or 10:30, a culvert from a road above us appeared on our upper bridge. And when that happened, it had come down from the highway about a half a mile up the road. As I learned later, debris had dammed up behind it and caused it to actually blow out. And when it did, that storm surge came down the creek, and no longer was that upper bridge passable. That is only one time in 61 years I've ever seen it do that. But that bridge was not passable. But that storm surge and all that debris came down, and it took a 2-car garage down to the concrete pad. It threw it into the upper end of the house and threw 4 feet of water into that house. That night, of course, we had no way of knowing how extensive the damage was or how many areas were affected because we're at the headwaters of the Tow River. But you got to assume on down the river, it's had some impact. So we, shortly thereafter, the power went out. All communications were cut off. We ended up evacuating there to a shelter, Red Cross shelter, and thankfully it was close by. And sure enough, the storm stopped. Another hour, and we'd have probably gotten by. When we got back in there and we could see the water had started to recede, there was no power, there was no communication equipment, nobody could get any gas. I have a daughter who lives in Asheville. No way to get word to check on her. Just didn't know. So that night, my sister and my brother-in-law, of course, they had no power, they had no water. We spent the first night there in the church. The next day, we got word that we could probably get a cell signal and there was gas if you went across the Tennessee line a little ways. So we went to get some gas and we went to where we could get some cell service. My wife just basically had the clothes on her back. She hadn't brought a change with her. So we said, we're going to go on into Tennessee. We're going to try to get a room. We're going to try to get a good night's sleep. Maybe make a phone call to our daughter, see how she is, get word out to some other family, let them know we're okay. Maybe do some laundry, maybe buy a change of clothes. We went, there was not a room to be had. There was no room at the inn. We discovered. Walmart was open though. We bought a few items of clothing, no rooms. We spent that night in the Walmart parking lot, Johnson City, Tennessee, in our car. We were able later that night or into the morning to get to a truck stop where we could do some laundry, get a hot meal, get a shower, and we headed back to begin our recovery. And when we got back and the waters had receded, we saw that our driveway had gullies in it that were probably 8 feet wide, 6 feet deep, I'm guessing. Debris against the bridges, that culvert, an 8 to 10 foot culvert was rested there on it. We had to basically cut our way across the bridge to make a footpath and then climb out of the driveway into the house only to find out there'd been 4 to 6 inches of mud in there. 4 feet of water had been in the house. Everything in the house under 4 feet, you forget it. It's gone. Look in your house sometime. Look at whatever's there under 4 feet. You don't realize how much is there under 4 feet. We were able to salvage a few things. But anything that was cloth, it wasn't solid, basically was gone. Now it was debris. Had to be mucked out. So, fortunately, we were able to get some help over the next coming days where we were able to cut the sheetrock out. We were able to muck the house out. We were able to get the carpet out. So hopefully right now we have a shell of a house. And we hope to go back there one of these days. But we were blessed in that I had that sister and she allowed us to come in there and pile in on her. And we stayed there for a month. So Freda, if you're listening, thank you. Now, I've heard help's not coming. But I'm going to tell you that from the day the hurricane happened, there was help there. Because we started looking up, and it wasn't necessarily the government, although local government was very involved, and I spent just about every day, sometimes 3 and 4 times a day, in contact with my local governments, trying to see if they were getting what they needed from the state, and the answer was usually always yes. There was a few times that they said, well, we need some help with this, or we need some help with that, and I made a phone call or two to some of the state agencies, and when that happened, the help was there. But volunteers, church groups, faith-based places, organizations were there. Help was there. I've heard help's not coming. It has been there in western North Carolina. And in my yard, hauling off debris, in my house, helping me get my appliances out, help has been there. It's not as plentiful as it once was. Obviously, the urgency of the thing has kind of died away a little bit. And I guess that's natural. But we are past, I think, and this is where we are past response and we're into recovery. And right there is the difference. The response has been great. And let me thank all those organizations, all those volunteers, all those state agencies, all those local governments that were in there and involved in this from day one. Thank you. You have been of help. And a lot of that is because this body put in place, had the foresight years ago to direct some grants to some of these organizations that enabled them to be there. So to say we're not doing anything, we've done it, and we continue to do it. We've allocated money that hasn't had time to even be spent yet. And we'll allocate more, I'm sure. And Mr. Speaker, let me say thank you so much for your personal interest and dedication in this, because I represent 4 counties. And I know that the Speaker himself was on the ground there, interested in what was going on. Could he do to help? Were we getting everything we needed? And I appreciate so much your interest in this and your interest in trying to help us do the right things to recover correctly. And I have no doubt that you're going to take that to Washington with you. And I appreciate that so much. And it was an honor to be in Washington with you yesterday, and Speaker-elect Hall, where we got a commitment from certainly our North Carolina delegation, but other appropriators out there, that they're aware of what's happened here, and help's coming. But I'm from the mountains, just an old mountain boy. We don't have much experience with hurricanes. I know John Bell and some of you guys from the Flatlands have. And so I'm trying to listen to what you guys are saying and understanding that this is a different storm from the mountains, what we've got to recover from. But one thing that I have learned in this whole process is if we outrun the federal government on what we can get reimbursed for, we're not going to be able to leverage those federal dollars in order to do what is right for Western North Carolina. And so I think that the folks who have dealt with these things before and have that understanding, and I appreciate them doing it, appropriations chairs, Representative Bell, you guys have been through this, you know how this federal reimbursement works, and I think this has been done in such a way that gives us the best chance to do that, because this is a $50 billion incident. North Carolina has a $30 billion budget per year. So if we took our whole next year's budget and every penny of reserve we've got, we don't have enough to pay for the recovery on this. And that is the bottom line about it. So I appreciate the thoughts that have gone in to each one of these allocations has been made. And the one thing that I don't understand, and I've gotten some of the same emails you guys have gotten, is I don't know how us putting a stop to this $250 million today gets us any more tomorrow. I just don't understand that. Maybe somebody can explain that to me. But I don't know that there's going to be another bill right away. So let's get this done. Let's quit arguing over the politics of it. As you say, Representative Ager, Representative Prather, Western North Carolina needs the help. Let's get it for them. I'm going to vote to override this veto, and I hope you'll vote with me.
The question before the House is a motion that Senate Bill 382 become law notwithstanding the objections of the governor. All those in favor of overriding the veto will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 74 having voted in the affirmative and 44 in the negative. The motion carries. Having passed by the requisite 3/5 vote, the House has overridden the governor's veto, and the bill becomes law, notwithstanding the governor's objections. The Senate is notified by a special message. To stay, but not to disrupt the proceedings of the House, and those who can't control themselves can leave out of either of those doors. We'll stand. Representative McGee, does the gentleman wish to be recorded as a no on the vote?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Clerk, the gentleman from Mecklenburg will be shown as having voted no on the motion. Representative Robertson, is that the same request, sir? Representative Robertson will also be recorded as having, let me just double check and make sure it doesn't affect the outcome.
Okay, so I don't know, you make sure. Did you?
Yes.
Bob.